Hello, welcome back to the channel. So on this video, I'm going to see how far we can get on this car. It doesn't really need too much more now outside of the timing, and then I did find the leak. So let me explain that real quick. I had originally this cardboard laid down that I'm kind of touching right here on the floor. And if we go kind of there, you can kind of see it. Here by the harmonic balancer, there's the timing cover, and then right below that, oil is falling onto this tube, and then it's dripping onto the floor from there. I have a pan right now to just catch it. It's not the most amount of oil that's falling in there, but it is a bit, and I'm now kind of kicking myself for not changing out that when I had the car torn apart. Now I've got to drain the antifreeze. I was going to do the oil change. You know, I did an oil change before I started the rebuild. However, that was like just like some cheap oil, a cheap oil filter, just to get it to turn over. And then I was going to tear it apart again. The reason I did that was because I was finding stuff in the transmission pan, in the differential. So I didn't want to even crank it for a minute, knowing that there was a possibility of that the oil pan also had potentially stuff that was put in there to purposely harm the car. And you know, when I tore it apart, I found all those pieces of gasket in the pickup tube of the oil pump. And so, yeah. So all of these were precautions, but right now it does not have the oil that I wish it had in there. At least the brand. And then the oil filter is just a cheap oil filter, so I gotta put a new one in. So with that being said, I guess it's not the worst thing, but you know, I will have to remove the water pump, and so that will be a little taxing, because I'll have to strain the new antifreeze that I poured in there. And yeah, so I also have to mess with that the crankshaft bolt. That the old crankshaft bolt did strip at the very end of the bolt, so I had to not re-drill, I had to tap in a little deeper so that the bolt, a longer bolt, would be able to be torqued down. And so I'm a little concerned about messing with that bolt again, but anyhow, let's see where we can get with this. In order to get the serpentine belt off the alternator, I had to release this bolt here, and that actually holds the bracket that goes behind back here, this one. And so I was able to just push that down. It released the tension, so I released the belt. That is the only bolt that I will be touching in regards to this bracket, the alternator, so on and so forth. I'm not even going to disconnect the alternator. It's just I should be able to reach everything else from there. So gotta get this hose off and these few bolts. But before I even touch the water pump, I need to drain the antifreeze, and I usually do it off of this bottom hose here because it's the lowest point to the ground, and it's the easiest one to just kind of dump the antifreeze without making a huge mess. Well, that bolt's looking like a problem. So rusted up there. Car is notorious for having bolts go into the water jackets, so I just pulled this one out here from the very bottom there, and you can see the tip is wet. So when I'm putting this back in, obviously I'm going to clean this bolt up, but I will make sure that it's I put some sort of sealer here, because otherwise I run the risk of the water coming out through the bolt. On whatever entity may be listening, please don't let there be any threads from the block. Oh, sweet, it's clean. All right, so water pump is moved to the side there, and then down here I have just this left to move. I need to get I have to get a tool that will pull the pulley out. There's no way I'd be able to push this off here. I am regretting so bad that I did not do this when I had the radiator torn down and just the entire engine torn down. However, I was so convinced that it was the oil pan gasket at the bottom that, and then the car was on jacks like this, so there was no oil coming down here at the bottom. It wasn't on its regular stance, and so it didn't start dripping, obviously, until I dropped the car down and ran it. So yeah, lesson learned. Next time, if I'm already touching something, I might as well just tear it all apart completely. All right, guys, so I've got the oil drained. The filter's right side up right now. I tried to make sure that none of it drips out of here. And I just want to make sure that the contents inside the filter are, you know, there's no harmful things to the engine. I want to go through this oil, but I'll have to do that afterwards. Right now, I'm just going to try to put the oil plug back in and then that oil filter up there. Or I should say, put the oil filter in. All right, I got the cover off. Don't mind that. I just kind of put it there just as a safety precaution, you know, in case that hose kept dripping any more water. But let me kind of talk about why this was kind of difficult to pull out of here. So this little trench here is the issue. So in my, whether it's leaking from there or not, like that's, you know, who knows what's really happening there. But as far as this, I wonder what that's all about. Hopefully nothing's loose. I'll have to look at my chain here in a second. This here won't come out unless you lower this part of the oil pan down right here, and where it kind of curves, like, I don't know how well I can show it, all that. So it sits in between that gasket, and however, I have a one-piece gasket, so in order to, and maybe this might even happen with like the multiple piece gaskets, but in order to get that out, I had to lower the pan. So, and in order to lower the pan on this car, I have to release that exhaust piece, that downpipe there, and I have to drop the starter. So I went ahead, loosened all the bolts on the pan, I would say they're about maybe half a centimeter down. And so that gave enough space for the cover to come out. Now, when I go to put it on, I have to torque all of them back on. So that's going to be kind of annoying. But hopefully this way doesn't make it so that I mess up the newly replaced oil pan gasket. One quick thing about this, I'm going to just be cleaning it out, the gasket surfaces, and then I will be installing this new gasket kit here. Felpro says that you actually need to use this on the gaskets. Usually I'm against, usually the gaskets are pretty well made that you don't require silicone, but in this case, since it is stating that I need it, I will be applying it. I've gone ahead and ran a wire brush through all of this, and I've noticed two things here. There's some pitting there, some pitting there. That's just not, the wire brush isn't getting. Also right around here and there. So that's why this was leaking. Now, I don't believe it necessarily needs to be replaced. I'm just going to make sure that I do apply a more generous amount of silicone right here in these areas. Also, I'm kind of unsure about the surface, these pinch welds around here. So just to make sure, I'm also going to run a small bead of silicone there to seal that up. I can't get in there very well because I don't really have the space. I'm actually as far back as I can go. So I've put some of this RTV that was included with the gasket behind here. Right now I've set the gasket on top. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a same thin bead all around this gasket, except for when I get down here to the corners, down there at the bottom where the gasket and the oil pan gasket meet. I'm definitely going to try to cover that up a little bit more with silicone there, because I feel like that's the area where the timing cover gasket has that pitting. And let me actually show you that on the cover itself. So right around here, so I'm going to try to see if I can seal up this entire area right here with silicone, and just to make sure that no oil comes into the gasket down here, and then this area is all filled as much as possible, just because I do believe, like I said before, that this is the troublesome area. If you can kind of see, I would hope it'd focus, but this gasket, let me see if I can come back out.
Yeah, it's not focusing. So this gasket down here, oh, there we go. It's ribbed, and so if any oil comes in there, it does have the likelihood of, you know, seeping out this way. So I'm going to try to block that area up right down here. All right, I got it on, and it doesn't look very pretty right around here or there or whatever. This gasket was a little complicated to put on because of the RTV. The RTV actually, the one that's provided, actually dries really fast. So I was kind of rushed on time, and I had to hurry up and torque everything down because, again, now if you're not doing the oil pan, like, you know, if you have this down or whatever, then you don't have to, I guess, rush it as much, because you would put in the gasket and then you'd fill in the silicone on the inside and then put up the oil pan. However, in my situation, because the gasket's already there and the pan's already there, and all I did was just drop it down a little bit, I really, once this got put in and squished all the silicone, this needed to come up too because if the silicone hardened, then now I'd have problems with this gasket sealing. And right now I actually am still even questioning it. Like, I see a small little indent right there that I'm not 100% sure if it was there. It's on both sides, but maybe, who knows, maybe that was the reason why this gasket was leaking, but I don't know. So I have to continue with the water pump. So we'll find out if I'm doing everything correctly once I fill it back up with oil and everything like that. So for now, I'm going to clean this up and then get ready to install this as well. Before I actually install the water pump, since I have all this space, I'm actually going to put the harmonic balancer in. I'm going to require this tool. Basically, this tip right here is interchangeable, but this is the one that fits inside there, inside in here. And so that will screw in all the way there. And then basically this nut, as I turn this nut this way, it will push this thing against the harmonic balancer, or this washer, whatever we want to call it. And it'll push this down because this will be stationary, but this will be moving forward as I spin this nut. Just something that might help you guys if you're ever installing this. And it's probably best that I do it on the other side, but however, the gap between here, so the outside part of the balancer and the block, needs to be 3 inches apart, exactly 3 inches apart. If you're there, then you know that this is deep enough. If it's a stock balancer, if it's an aftermarket one, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. Unfortunately, this is a stock one. So, because if you look down there, I don't know if I can kind of see, maybe, let me see if I can get in there. So if you can kind of see down in here, there's a fairly big gap. So if you try to press this all the way in, you're gonna either break your tool or you're gonna cause some damage in there. This only goes in 3 inches apart from here to the block. All right, so the harmonic balancer's on back here. And then I also just lightly put on the water pump. Again, it required silicone on the gaskets, and so I have just made this nice little, I haven't really torqued them down, so it just made this nice little squish all the way around. So here in a second, actually probably in like 15-20 minutes, I will probably go ahead and, oh my gosh, look, I got silicone all the way up here. I will go ahead and torque them down. Right now I'm just going to hook up this hose down here, and then at the very end I will put the additional pulley that runs the belt. One other thing I haven't shown is that I got the starter back on, and I also have the part of the exhaust on down here. You can see there. So all that got connected as well. The dust cover too goes right there. So it's just a matter of waiting for that water pump. Just need that silicone to get just a little bit, or to create at least an outside film. All right, so I've got everything assembled. The pulley's back on, alternator's all tightened, and I'm a little unsure as to where I had originally left off, but all the hoses are all clamped down, and so it's all good to go. However, small issue. See the spark plugs that are out? The cylinders got washed by the fuel because it was running really rich. So I need to figure out when I pulled the oil out, and this is why you want to change your oil when you do this type of stuff. When I changed the oil out, there was a hint of gasoline. And then when I opened this up, you could kind of smell it. So I went ahead and removed the valve covers. I put oil all up in the valve covers. And then I filled it up that way with both valve covers open. And then just pouring the oil above here. And now, I need to figure out how to lubricate the cylinder walls with engine oil. Unfortunately, I'm not the most certain on how to do that, so I'm going to have to research it, and then I may tell you guys how I did it. I might not, just because I don't know that I would recommend I don't really want to recommend something that I'm not 100% on. All my vehicles are newer and they all have oil squirters because they are modified race cars. And so typically I wouldn't have this issue if for any of the reason my other cars wash the cylinder walls, I would just go ahead and get the car primed like normal. With this car though, can't do that. I could put the drive shaft down through the distributor like I did it before when I was assembling the engine, have it pump the oil up to the top of the motor, and I actually will probably end up doing that. But that isn't going to lubricate the cylinder walls. So to do the cylinder walls, I have to figure out how to get oil in there, like in the walls themselves, and then I'll manually crank the engine over or turn the engine over, and I need to have the pistons actually go up and down, and the pistons will be the ones that are lubricating the cylinder walls. So it's just a matter of figuring out how to get oil inside the 4 cylinders on each side, and the quantity of oil that I should have in there. I've sprayed a little bit of oil into each cylinder. I've also taken my camera and stuck it into each cylinder hole. That's why the spark plugs are out. And just to make sure that nothing was scored in there inside the cylinder walls. And now, I've also turned the engine manually. And so everything should be lubricated properly, or, you know, as best as it can be after fuel has gone in through there. And so I need to get this off, and then turn the oil pump manually. But I need to look into this fuel situation real quick. I've got this fuel pressure regulator that it is for fuel injection. So I don't know if this is going to work out, but this is all I can think of. I've had this for a little bit and I might as well put it to use now. So, you know, eventually this might be something that I might go with anyway, and I might actually really need it. So for now, we might as well just take the time to get it on the car and see if it does anything to help that carburetor not run so rich. Outside of the rebuild of it, maybe I didn't get the right float needles in there. However, I still would feel more comfortable if I can keep the fuel regulated as to how much is actually going into the carburetor. So I've got this piece of aluminum that I've currently bent like this, and I'm going to try to turn this into a bracket so I can mount this up and then connect all this up. So let me get that put together and then we'll continue. All right, so I think this is gonna work out pretty good. However, I don't know that I wanna use the braided lines for this current setup for now. So I might just switch these hoses out real quickly. However, they are the right length and everything like that. And this is currently the setup that it's going to be in. If we look at the bracket, I had to kind of make my own stuff. So I had to make this piece that goes into the block there, into the head, I mean, and then this, as I showed before, this tall one. But all right, so I've got everything set up in its temporary setup, and I've got the gauge on and everything like that. So one thing you might notice on the gauge is 160 PSI. But basically what I'm trying to see on this is that that needle just only moves up a tiny bit, maybe 2 or 3 notches up, and stays there. This carburetor is only supposed to run on, I believe, like 5 or 6 psi. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so I definitely just need this to regulate the pressure under 10 psi. So eventually this will come useful, but for right now, it's just, hopefully this kind of just slows down the fuel pressure as well. And so let's see what ends up happening with this setup, and hopefully this will make it so that it won't wash the cylinders. All right, I've got everything assembled back and put back together. Spark plug wires are all connected. Spark plugs are torqued down. And then we have the distributor back in down here. If you haven't seen me run the oil up through this, the system, obviously not through the pistons, but through like the valves and stuff, you basically remove the distributor and then you run this tool. This tool will spin the oil pump, and it will have the oil come up to the top, and you just use a drill for this. So at this point, I think we are at a position where I can start the car. However, it's pretty late right now, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to wait till tomorrow morning. One thing to note that I always do, just kind of make sure that my timing is always on. So as you can see, I'm sitting at top dead center, and by top dead center, I mean that I checked that the first cylinder was on the compression stroke, and then this, like the markings down there, are lined up. I don't know if you can see the marking on the bolt hole, but that's how I always set everything up with fuel injection. And so I'm kind of used to that. So by doing this, the car has started for me every single time. So I'm going to continue doing this. I don't know if that is the right method for carbureted engines, but for me, that's just what I know. One other thing I also realized is that the reason I never used this on one of my other cars was because this particular one, even though I backed out the bolt, when you back it out, that's less compression. When you tighten it in, that's more more pressure. So let's just say, so I backed this out as much as I could, and I don't recall this particular pump running super low on PSI. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, and I don't have to disassemble this and make some modifications so that it's as open as it can go, because I think the spring in here between the cap and the base of this, when that's closed, that's still making pressure that I don't think that this will start at like even like 10 psi, let alone like down to 5, between 5 and 7.
Okay, so I'm unable to figure out this fuel problem. It's still getting too much fuel. The only thing I can think of that's going on is the fuel pump. I haven't touched it. I haven't messed with it. I haven't seen how much pressure it's putting in. I know that the fuel pump is not like a fuel injection fuel pump. It's probably just one that's like doing like 12 to 15 psi, and this carburetor requires to be within like I think 5 to 6 psi. And so this fuel pressure regulator that I have in here, because it is for a fuel injection setup, it's not going to work right, if it even works at all. And so I have ordered a new fuel pressure regulator. It should arrive in a few days. Hopefully this will fix the issue. If it does not, then at that point I might need to just skip. I really wanted to have a running and driving carbureted car, so I could get that experience, like of what it's like to be in one of those. To be honest with you, outside of my two cars here, I've never even sat in a carbureted car outside of these two that I've recently got. So I kind of want to see what it was like to kind of drive one of those and everything like that. But if it's just not going to work, I don't want to keep wasting time and keep messing with something that I'm not really like the most familiar with, where I could just convert this to something that I am more familiar with, and then have a car that's actually running, in my opinion, that would be running even better than anything that this would ever be able to produce. So for now, we're just gonna call it good here, and then we will continue this once I get a new fuel pressure regulator, and then hopefully then I can do the timing and everything else that, you know, this car still requires. But for now, we just we'll call it good here, and thanks for watching. Catch you guys on the next one.